It's an honor and privilege for me to join this company, Unilever, about 7 months ago or 9 months ago now. 161,000 employees, 190 countries. And if you look at our product suite, we are either one or two in every market we operate. So talk about the amount of data that this company generates internally. You can see some stats here. I think we generate about, also, if you look at the way we run our company, so far we start with data. Everything starts with the data. So that's where, as we move towards looking at AI, machine learning, deep learning, it's really imperative how we build some foundation capabilities leveraging data. So if you look at our approach to technology in Unilever, we have many technologies like any large corporations, 30 technology platforms. We literally run about 100,000 IT users we support on a daily basis. These are white collars. We use our technology platform. We run about 28 petabytes of data today, growing exponentially on an average of few petabytes every quarter. And as you said, we run about 190 countries, but definitely we're connecting about 900 connected sites with our factories, with our users, et cetera, et cetera. So the technology is at the heart as the DNA of the company to run this. And when you have the technology, the data follows through it. So what's our approach to technology? I think every digital transformation starts with a message of, you can't just do technology for the sake of technology, right? You got to understand what is the value of the technology that brings and drives the company, whether it's the top line growth or the bottom line savings, et cetera. So in Unilever, it is always starts with purpose, right? Everything that we do starts with purpose and what it means to our end users and consumers and customers. And build on that to define what products and innovations we want to bring to the market, be it in our personal care products, our home care products, or our food and refreshments capabilities. And build that on top of that with our culture and skills. Unilever has a very unique culture. Operating in 190 countries, sometimes it feels like 200 cultures, but there is an underlying theme that drives that. This is where, again, going back to our purpose and value. Our technology operations is really large, as we talked about, and the platform is pretty big. But bottom line is, as we said, digital platform is all about what is the value the underlying technology brings to the table, not about technology wagging the dog, tail wagging the dog, right? We don't want to be in that space. We want to look at technology as a foundation, as a capability to drive the value for the company. So many of you might have seen this. Many of you know that the word artificial intelligence was coined in Dartmouth, 1956. I think the vision from that Dartmouth conference is all about how do you replicate human beings, right? We saw the first incarnation about humanoids, or the 2001 Space Odyssey HAL computer that you have seen, or even the Terminator movies where the Terminator characters, etc. But I think, they're all still science fiction, right? I think we are still far away from getting those things into reality. Even today's theme about 2030, where Magesh talked about how we'll be there in about 2030 to get that parity. But I think the world has moved along quite strongly from where we started in 1956, about artificial intelligence, to more grounded, realistic about, instead of replicating human brain, how do you bring that thinking process to the world, into the machines, leveraging through machines. With the evolution of machine learning and deep learning, I think we are in a very good spot to tackle the 2030 problem that the stage that we are talking today. I'll come back to this at the end of the speech to reflect back on why now, right? Because we've been talking about this for 50 years, actually 70 years, and I'm sure we'll talk about this for the next 50 years. But why this has become extremely critical and even now become pervasive. We built large-scale systems, we built our traditional BI capabilities, but BI capabilities only get you as far as you can get, right? It helps to run the company. It only tells you what happened, what might have happened. It doesn't tell you how to optimize, how to predict for the future. If you look at the data sets, like we have, as you said, 30 platforms that generates 22 petabytes of data, but they're all very silos, right? Trying to bring any sense out of the data across the systems has been very difficult for us. And also, given the large corporation, we have a country silos, we have functional silos, etc. And there is a data ownership within those silos. Bringing them all together, it is a journey for us. And equally, data sitting in different systems, disparate systems, lack of proper interfaces, etc. Getting access to data is really painful for us. And most importantly, like any BI systems you might have seen, people start questioning the reports it generates. Because if you're not sure of the results that you're looking for, if the first instinct is going to question the data, it's, oh, I don't trust this data. Then you start building reports to test your data and the report that you produce, and it's a never-ending cycle. We are at the tipping point of fundamentally changing the mindset about how do you move away from instinct-driven approach to decision-making to data-driven approach. I think this is where the company is making significant investment in actually not only creating the cultural change about moving to a data-driven approach, and to help it migrate to that approach, build the foundation with the technology. That's why we call it a significant opportunity for us, looking at all these areas as a holistic way. I think most of you in the room must be very familiar, especially if you're from IT or if you're running an IT department. Right? Traditionally, it always started with, in the way back in the 80s and 90s, what we call traditional BI or technical BI. Right? If you need a report, if you need a piece of information, you call your friends in IT and they will produce a report for you. And that continued for a while. And then people got frustrated as the time lag to produce a report started going longer and longer, and each one becoming a monthly project to quarterly project to annual projects. And sometimes the anecdotal history is it takes years to get a report, right? And we all seen that. Then technology has moved on to produce more of a self-service BI. Okay, here's a piece of data. I'll give you access to data. You generate your own insights. I think, where we are in the time horizon with the maturity of the technology and the availability of the data, right, we are in a perfect tipping point to democratize data and insights for everybody in the organization. As I said, 110,000 white-collar users in our company. Imagine giving the power of data in their hands that they can generate their own insights by themselves to do the job better. I think that's where we are at. And what we're going to talk about a little bit today is the idea of a data lake, how that is going to help change this paradigm for Unilever. How many of you heard the term data lake? Okay, quite a, so I think there's a significant hand raise. Otherwise, we need to start talking about what is a data lake. I think, in simpler terms, data lake is an idea where you bring in any type of data, shape, size, color, whatever you want to call it, bring it into one place where you can start making sense out of it, whether machine learning, deep learning, whatever you want to call it, but having in one place of all types of data, I think it's a powerful paradigm shift from where we had come from. Traditionally, we would have used our data warehouse technology where the data is extremely normalized. I think there was a term that often goes with data warehouses. It's like Hotel California, right? You can only put it in, you can never take it out. You can never leave the data warehouse. So I think there is the idea of a data lake unshackles us from the constraints that we had about data warehouses, especially as the volume of data explodes. I mean, looking at our own data, right? 22 petabytes of data. There is no technology in data warehouse that can hold the kind of a data and generate the analytics that we are looking for. So far, our approach had been diagnostics and descriptive analytics. What happened, why it happened, etc., but not about the future. What can I do with that decision, etc. So that's where the idea of a data lake comes really powerful. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out what is a data lake in the Unilever construct. Is it one lake? Is it multiple lakes? Every country started asking, okay, I need a lake for myself. And our functions started asking we need our own lake. Then it kind of defeats the whole purpose of a data lake, right? Data lake has to be universal if you want to democratize data and insights for everybody. So that's why we took a very hard stand and said, at a Unilever scale, we're going to have one physical data lake that's going to have all the data that Unilever ever produce, or continue to produce, any other external data, like Nielsen's, Kantar's, all the external sources, social chatters that we want to worry about our consumer behavior. We want to bring all those data into this platform. That's why we named it Universal Data Lake. There are two important aspects of this data lake. First and foremost, it is stored in its native form because we want to make sure the data that we receive from a particular source, either it is a supply chain data or a Twitter feed, if we change the shape of the data before we processing it, then the lineage is broken and people will not trust the data. So to ensure that starting the trust, we want to start with that to ensure that there is a lineage that we can ensure. So that we got the source data, we can start trusting the data Either your source is consistently right or consistently wrong, but at least we can trust the data. Then, the most important point we want to bring it in here is the idea of time series, how deep you want. If you look at the traditional transaction systems, they store the data for 2 years. Some countries, it'll be 7 years, depending on the various country regulation. But if you want to run deep learning and machine learning algorithms, you need a lot more data. The more the depth is better in both cases. In some cases, it'll be decremental, but as much we can, depending on the use cases, we are time seriesing as deep as possible. Right? Some cases, we're going up to 10 years of data. So that's the idea of universal data lake. Then we said, okay, you got the source data. I'm not generating any insights out of it, or I'm not even aggregated it, consolidated, I've not done it yet. So that's where the first processing starts. So we introduced the idea of a business data lake. Again, is an idea. It's not a physical thing, because it still sits in the universal data lake, but it's where we start processing to a particular function. For example, marketing. Marketing may be interested in a set of KPI. Supply chain may be interested in another set of KPIs. R&D may be looking at certain KPIs. So that's why we introduced the idea of a business data lake. Again, a logical construct that sits on the physical data lake. Now that we have that done, we have the source data, we have the KPIs process, etc. Now we can serve up advanced analytics through our products, be it through APIs, dashboards, natural language processing. We have actually NLP interface to some of our analytics. Recently, we did some POCs to demonstrate this capability to talk about slow-moving goods. Can we predict slow-moving goods before they become slow-moving goods? Very interesting idea, isn't it? Right? If you know that this particular product is a slow-moving product, before it becomes slow-moving, I won't make major investment in that product. So I think what we believe in this idea is this is going to completely unlock and create the democracy we talked about for both data and analytics for us. Then the question is, why now, and what are some of the impedances for this technology? I think, today we are at a crossroads with perpetual scalability, with the cloud providing the foundation capabilities for the data lake, and the algorithms that it can run on the infinite scale that we now have available through the cloud computing. I think, the ML and deep learning is now here. Looking at the chart, it's not 30 years from now, 20 years from now. It's right now, it's available at a price point that is economical for all of us to democratize data and insights. But at the same time, there are a few things that's going to be really cumbersome for us. First and foremost, veracity, trust, right? As we bring in more and more sources of data, if you don't have a trust in the data, nobody's going to trust the analytics that comes out of it. So one of the things that's keeping me awake is how do I make sure that our data lake doesn't become Belandur Lake like a swamp, if you are from Bangalore. Bias, right? Human beings, as they create the models, the bias naturally comes in. Brexit, people missed it because there was an inherent bias, right? I think there's a joke about who's going to win World Cup. Germany, everybody predicted is Germany, even though Dartmouth Conference created that algorithm, there was an inherent bias that they won the World Cup last time, and they were the favorite, they predicted. So it's inherent bias. That keeps me up at night. And then the recent one is data residency laws that's coming out in various countries. China, Russia, as recently as Vietnam 2 weeks ago, and now India. They're all trying to create boundaries in terms of where the data gets stored, purely for jurisdiction purposes, so that they can have access to the data. And that's going to have an impact on this strategy, but we are watching it very closely, because most of the data that we put in right now is not personally identifiable data, so we are okay, but the moment it becomes PII data, we will have an impact. So just to wrap it up, I think the idea of a data lake is a huge unlock when you come from the traditional BI world to look at predictive and prescriptive analytics and eventually automate decision making in the future. I think there's a great potential with data lakes. Thank you.